Before we get started on the class, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Bodha. Namo Shakyamuni Bodha. Good morning, beautiful people. So we're continuing on our meditation discussion of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Third, foundation of mindfulness of mind. And last class we covered the first exercise under this mindfulness, third mindfulness, which is the observation of the mind. And I was going to complete the last 2 exercises, 14 and 15. But after I meditated on it for a little bit, I'm going to dedicate the entire. So I think it needs more attention than just a handful of minutes. So we will continue with exercise 14. So in the Satipatthana Sutra, on the discourse of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, exercise 14 of observing anger, the Buddha says, when anger is present in him, he is aware anger is present in me. When anger is not present in him, he is aware anger is not present in me. When anger begins to arise, he is aware of it. When already arisen anger is abandoned, he is aware of it. When anger already abandoned will not arise again in the future, he is aware of it. So essentially, when anger arises, you know anger arises. When anger ceases, you know anger ceases. As the conditions for anger arises, you know those conditions are present. And when the conditions disappear, you know that the conditions disappear. So just like with the other foundations and the other exercises, the key practice here is, of course, observing those foundations or those exercises in mindfulness, right? So observing the mind, the foundation of the mind is probably the second most complicated of the 4 foundations, since the mind encapsulates everything else that we do in life, right? Or anything that we do in life. Everything stems from the mind first. All of your speech and actions stem from the mind, right? Always starts as thoughts, and then it turns into speech, and then it turns into actions. And so in Buddhism, because of those kind of sequential orders of things that we do, it said that we're comprised of the 5 aggregates, or the 5 skandhas of form, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. And anger itself, or anger, the arising of anger belongs to, the unpleasant feelings that anger brings up belongs to the aggregate of feelings. And so since those things still arise within us, right, we have to be able to master that anger, master our minds. And that's essentially one of the most important practices of our path. And as the exercise mentions, as the Buddha tells us, that we need to be able to identify the presence and the absence of anger when it arises. And if we're able to do that, seeing the arisen of anger and seeing when anger doesn't exist, right? So it doesn't exist, right? So the absence of it and the arisen of anger is important. Pretty straightforward and pretty common sense. And that is that when we see anger is not present, we're much happier, right? There's no doubt in that. We're not angry, well, there's nothing to be angry about, and then we're okay. We're either content, we're in the neutral state, or we're happy for the most part. But the Buddha tells us that anger is like a flame blazing up and consuming our self-control, making us think, say, and do things that we will probably regret later. And the actions of body, speech, and mind that we perform while we're angry takes us a long way along the road to hell. And sometimes we can see that clearly whenever someone is angry, right? If someone is clearly in a dispute, or they are arguing about something, or whatever it may be, right? We can surmise that they're abiding in some type of hell, right? In Buddhism, we have dozens of realms of existence, right? But the 6 main ones is in this kind of world that we live in, realms of existence. But the lowest of the 3 realms is hell. And this doesn't necessarily mean a physical locale, right? It's not a place burning in brimstone and fire and demons, but just the mental state of hell that we are occasionally in, right? Right now it's hot as hell. To me, that's hell. Like, I hate the heat. I absolutely cannot stand it. I want it to be 67.8 degrees year long. Like, I'm very specific. But that doesn't exist. So to me, this is hell. But hell is that state of mind, as when your mind is not content, when your mind is not calm, when your mind is not mindful or aware of what is happening, and that it's stirring up emotions or feelings that is going against what you want, that is a state of hell, technically. And so the Buddha tells us that the absence of anger is the basis of real happiness. So when anger does not exist, then there's nothing that's going to stir up the emotions, the feelings, the causes that boil within us, that causes us to be angry. Because just imagine, you don't even have to imagine, we all know what it's like to feel really angry. We all know what it feels like to just be possessed by anger, and then we start to do and say things that are destructive, that are dangerous, that are hurtful to ourselves and to others, right? We've all been there. I'm guilty of punching many holes in walls in my youth. I can't anymore. I'm too old. I feel like I'd break a finger or something. But we're all guilty of doing stupid stuff under the influence of anger, right? Knowing that anger arises is one of your best. That's what I'm looking for. Guardian, right? Because we are not our mind, and we cannot control our mind, right? The mind controls you for now, right? We're not the masters of our mind yet. The master is still controlling you, and your master is a stupid mind. And the stupid mind wants to be able to do things that will control you. And it does that by allowing you to be angry, to allow you to be jealous, to be hateful, to be deceitful, to want things beyond your means, to want things that other people have. Anything that you have a desire or a want, or even things that you want to push away, or whatever it means, you know what I'm talking about. Like anything that has to do outside of yourself, outside of your own mind, the mind is what's controlling that. It's the ego, it's this self that we have. It's not the mind, or not that is having these desires. And these desires is when they are not fulfilled, or unable to be fulfilled, that's a little spark, that's enough spark for the mind to ignite that anger within you. Oh, I want this house. This house is $10 million. Well, I got 10 million pennies in my bank account. Does that count? Right? That's not enough. And because you can't afford it, you don't have enough, then you start to get angry, you start to get upset about your life choices and this and that and whatever it may be. So knowing that the absence of anger brings us happiness is already one step ahead of 99.999% of other people that don't have that same benefit. Benefit meaning that they don't have enough awareness to recognize that they are angry. The second benefit that the Buddha tells us about the benefit of mindfully observing the presence and the absence of anger is that just by identifying our anger, it loses some of its destructive nature. So only when we're angry and not observing our anger mindfully does our anger become destructive. And so as this entire discourse is teaching us, and the discourse that preceded this one, the mindfulness of breathing discourse with Anapanasati, right, which is the entirety of it is being able to, or gives us exercises about following our breath or going back to our breath, right? So in this sutra, in this discourse in the Four Foundations, it's no different. And so when anger is born, when anger starts to arise, the first thing we need to do is go back to our breathing, go back to our conscious breathing, and mindfully observe that anger. Observe what is coming with that anger, right? What's standing alongside that anger. That way, if you're mindful enough, then what you can do is have this little mindful mantra that the Buddha tells us, right? Is that I know that I'm angry. Or as I breathe in, I know I'm angry. Or as I breathe in, anger is arisen. When I breathe out, I know my anger is still there, right? Whatever it may be, whatever terminology, whatever little mantra I'm going to use, the point is to identify it when it is occurring. That way you know what it is. Because otherwise, if someone's just yelling at you and you feel angry, right? You feel that heat, that emotion that's within you, but you're not really giving it a title. You're not really identifying what it is. Then you're just letting it run loose. Like little children at the park, right? If you're not paying attention to where they're going to disappear and someone's going to pick them up and you'll never see them for 20 years. Same way if we don't follow our anger. If you let it run around and disappear, you're going to be angry for the next 20 years and you have no idea why you're angry. Right? We know people like that. Right? At least one person in your life that they seem always angry. It's because they lost their children. Children of feeling, of course, not their real children. I'm assuming. Maybe they lost their children. I don't know. But the point is, their mindfulness ran off and disappeared and got abducted and never came back. And because they never came back and got abducted, they have nothing to recognize that anger as it arises. But this awareness, at least, this mindfulness, can become a true companion for that anger, because our mindful observation is not to suppress or to drive away or drive out that anger, but it's just to be able to look after it, to be able to say, okay, I know you're there. I know you're arisen. I know that you're angry. I know these are the feelings and emotions that we are feeling, right? Because the step of being mindful of anger is very important to our practice, and especially while we're meditating. Because mindful observation is like a lamp that gives light, right? It doesn't judge. It's not there to judge. It just throws light onto our anger, and it sponsors it, and lets us know that, hey, I'm here for you, and it looks after it in an affectionate and caring way. That way, it doesn't. Let me backtrack a little bit. Because even when we're meditating, right, especially new meditators, the most common thing that happens that disappoints or discourages or makes people believe that they can't meditate is their own judgment against themselves, their own unwillingness to recognize that faults can happen, that faults are going to happen, right? The number one reason I hear people that tell me that they stop meditating or can't meditate is because, well, I can't clear my mind, I can't stop, I can't shut it off, I can't stop, right? I don't think anything is happening, I don't believe anything's happening, blah, 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 right? And because of being, instead of recognizing what's happening in the mind, right, the actual actions or the kind of the motions that's happening in the mind, instead of paying attention and being mindful of that, they're paying more attention to the disability of not being able to meditate. Well, the reason you are unable to meditate is because you're not paying attention to what's happening in the mind. You're using that as an excuse to say, oh, I just can't meditate. Meditation isn't for me. I can't sit for this much time. I can't do this, I can't do that, right? They're using excuses to try to validate what's happening in the mind. But what's happening in the mind is just what's happening in the mind. You had no control over it, right? Like I said, you're not the master of your mind yet. So you can't control, you can't stop what the mind is habitually and naturally going to do, which is think, which is argue with yourself, which is telling you can't do this, you can't do this, this hurts, this is uncomfortable, this isn't me, this is not what I want to do, etc., etc., etc. All this BS that the mind is trying to drive you away from what you're actually wanting to do. In this case, it's meditate, to be still, to be quiet, to be peaceful, be tranquil. Well, guess what? The mind doesn't want that for you. Otherwise, we would all be enlightened, right? So we have no control. So part of our meditation is to be friends with that uncontrollability that the mind does. Be like, you know what? I understand you don't want to meditate. I understand that being in a place of quietude is discomforting for you because the mind doesn't know anything else besides chaos. It doesn't know anything else besides regret, besides remorse, besides resentment, besides trauma. It doesn't know anything else besides these things because you're not allowing it to think or contemplate or be mindful of anything else except those things. If anyone has ever been to a good therapist in enough time, I hope that at one point you discover that I'm going to say we as a general, us crazy people that used to go to therapy or still go to therapy, that a lot of times we hang on to our trauma as a safety net. Because it is something that we are comfortable with. It is something that we recognize. It's something that makes sense. It is something that brings a stupid kind of comfort, knowing that we can use this as an excuse. We can use this to block this out or block these people out. Use this as an excuse to not do this or not do that. Right? We hang on to specific time periods of our lives, specific trauma, specific experiences, and we hang on to that as canon and not allow ourselves to progress because of that holdback, because of that roadblock. Anger is the same way, right? Anger works in the same way because anger doesn't come from nothing. And if we are mindful enough and we're practiced enough, then we know that when we're angry, our anger is our very self. So to suppress or to chase away our anger is to suppress or chase away ourselves. Because when we're joyful, we're joyful. When we're happy, we're happy. When we're loving, we're love. When we're hate, we're hatred, right? When anger is born, then we can be aware that anger is an energy in us. and that we can change that energy and transform it into a different kind of energy that's more beneficial, that's more helpful, that's better suited to the state of mind that we want to have. But if we want to transform it, then we first have to know how to accept it. We can't push it away. We can't be like, yeah, I want to feel angry. I want to stay angry. I want to be that neighbor that everyone just like, oh, don't mess with them. They're mean all the time. They're angry all the time for no apparent reason. Don't be that person. Nobody likes you. You don't even like yourself. One of the examples I found that kind of helps picture this transformation of, or being able to transform the energy of anger, it was using the example of a garbage can or of a dumpster that's filled with just trash and decomposing organic material, right? Because that organic material can be transformed into compost, right? And later into roses and fruits and vegetables. But at first, when we see that garbage and flowers that the compost would produce as separate, right, as opposite, right? Like how does garbage become flowers and how does flowers become garbage? But if we're able to look deeply and truly meditate on this trash that smells and stinks, we want nothing to do with, and meditate also on the flower that we do want to smell and have something to do with, they're one of the same. They're just transforming from one form to another. It may take a few weeks or months for compost to turn into flowers, right? And also take a few months or weeks for flowers to turn to compost, but they are essentially the same. They develop and they come from the same place. And so if we're able to see just how in nature things can be that transformative, then our emotions, our feelings are no different, right? The flower didn't come from nothing. Your anger too did not come from nothing. So where did this anger come from? Because we can backtrack where the flowers came from. We can backtrack that it came from the soil, from the earth, from compost, and just the list goes on and on and on and on, right? It's an infinite list, obviously. Thankfully, our anger doesn't have an infinite list. Otherwise, we would never be free from anger. Thankfully, our anger, the list of where anger comes from is finite, and there is an end to it. And so then the example continues, the Buddha continues on saying that we need not be afraid. We know that anger to transform it. So if we know how to accept our anger, then we already have some peace and joy. So when our anger arises, other mental formations can also arise, which are lying dormant in the depths of our consciousness that are not yet arisen. This deep consciousness in Buddhism we call the alaya vijnana, or the alaya consciousness. Alaya means store or storehouse. Vijnana just means consciousness. But this deep consciousness has many seeds, right? We have this metaphor of the field of consciousness in Buddhism. And in this field of consciousness, we sow the seeds that arise within us. When we're angry, we're sowing seeds of anger. When we're happy, we sow seeds of happiness. When we're jealous or frustrated or hating something or loving something or liking something, whatever it may be, we're sowing these seeds in our field of consciousness, right? And they'll lie dormant until the conditions arise that we start to water those seeds, right? So just because you're not angry right now, doesn't mean you don't have seeds of anger. They're just lying dormant. They will start to arise, and so they'll start to be watered when you start to have an argument with somebody that is causing that anger that anger seed to start to sprout and start to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So even the seeds of joy and sadness, love and hate, for example, right? These are all present in the alaya, in the stored consciousness, when we are angry. But when they're lying beneath the surface without manifesting, that they are lying beneath the surface without manifesting, like seeds in the ground. So if we let that anger express itself without giving it a sponsor, right? Sponsor meaning mindfulness, or at least an awareness, then it can do a lot of damage inside and outside of ourselves. So when the mental formation mindfulness arises from the alaya, from the stored consciousness, it can become the spiritual friend of mental formation of anger. So as we follow our breathing and sponsor our anger with mindfulness, the situation becomes less and less dangerous. Even though our anger is still there, it's still buried in our minds, but it can gradually lose its strength and begins to transform into a different type of energy, even a different type of seed. And if we shine light on that, if we shine the light of awareness, shine light of mindfulness on our state of mind, then that state of mind will transform into something better. So thanks to the illuminating light of awareness, of the mindfulness that we apply to whatever emotion or feeling arises, we can see the roots of our anger. In the same way, we can shine light in a dark room and see what's causing the darkness, or see the obstacles on the ground so that we don't step on it. We can shine the light of awareness onto our anger and see its roots. So again, anger does not come from nowhere, right? You may be angry at your husband or your wife. Well, are you angry because they just didn't do it, or they forgot to do it, or because they did it the wrong way? Superficially, you'll say yes. I asked them to do it, they didn't do it. That's why you're angry. Well, it's not really why you're angry. That's a very superficial reason. There's something beyond that. Because if they didn't do it or they did it differently, then why does it matter? So that in itself is not the reason of the anger. So think a little bit harder. Why are you angry? Because they didn't do something that you asked them to do. Or they didn't do something in the right way, like you wanted them to do. What is the true reason behind that? And there's an answer. Very straightforward answer. Actual question, actually. What is the real reason that you're angry at your husband or wife for not doing something that you asked them to do, or they did something differently than what you asked them to do?
I think it all comes down to ego.
No? Okay, very good. Ego ends?
They do things like, I think about the times that I get angry. It's all because I take their actions as some personal hit against
A personal hit against the ego that has expectations. Okay? And so when you ask your husband or wife to do something the way you want it, and they didn't, and they did the exact opposite, it's not that they did it oppositely, it's because they did it against what you wanted, against your own expectations. I expected this wall to be pink, but you painted it blue. WTF washer. Stupid things like that, right? How many times have we had these conversations with people? But it's not the act of them doing it wrong that's causing anger. It's the act that you wanted it to be done differently. Well, guess what? You're actually not that important. Right? As much as our wives and husbands want to think that they are, we're not. Not in the grand sense of things, of course. But those are the types of things we really have to ask yourself when anger arises. Is why does this anger arise? Where is it coming from? Because if it does come from a place of ego and expectation, then it's not a true cause of anger. That's just you. And we're not that important. I'm not that important. Right? We have Quang here now, right? As one of our pre-monastics. He does and says things all the time. I just want to like punch him in the face sometimes because it's just wrong. But I know better. It's not wrong because because of what he's doing and saying is actually wrong. It's wrong because to me it's wrong. But I just have to remind myself, I'm not that important. Who cares what I think or say or want, right? I'm going to die in, I don't know, maybe 50 years, maybe 10, maybe a month or two, who knows. But then when I'm gone, it doesn't matter. My expectations, my desires will have zero effect on the world. So why does it matter, right? So if you want something done one way or the other and it doesn't happen, why does it matter? Also, I'm kidding. There's nothing that you do that I want to punch you in the face for. Maybe a few things, but we'll see. So as we already know, like when people or us, even ourselves, right, whenever we're angry, we say and we do things that have a big potential of causing damage, causing harm to ourselves and to others. And there are people who speak and act in ways that will hurt or wound others, right? That they believe doing so by venting out, by doing something that is hurtful, that will release some kind of filled up or built up energy of anger that's inside, right? You may scream and you'll shout and you'll yell and you'll beat things and you'll shoot some poisonous arrows of speech at people, right, as methods of release. But these methods are dangerous. So even if people try less dangerous ways to express their anger, right, you may be slamming doors, you may be screaming into the pillow or punching the pillow, right, doing whatever you're doing. But doing these things will just exhaust your energy, right? And the anger might subside a little bit and you'll feel some temporary experience of relief because exhaustion is easier to deal with than anger, right? I hope. No, it's true. But the roots of the anger still remains untouched, right? And when that conditions are right again, then that same anger will just re-arise. It didn't go anywhere. Just because you've suppressed it by yelling and heading and shouting and doing whatever it is, doesn't mean you got rid of it. You just shoved it into the back of the closet. And guess what? The next time you go in to find something to hit your husband with, you're going to find that anger next to the bat that you're about to beat him with. So when our anger does arise, the first thing we need to do is come back to our conscious breathing and sponsor that anger with mindfulness. And of course, if someone is causing anger, then we need to be practical. Avoid listening to them, avoid looking at them, right? When we regard a person as the cause of our anger. Because usually when we're angry, we don't usually return or come back to ourselves to take care of ourselves and heal ourselves when we're angry. We typically want to just think about the hateful things about that person or about the aspects of that person that they made us angry, that they're rude or dishonest or they're cruel or they're doing malicious things, etc., etc., etc. Right? That's what we're thinking when someone makes us angry. How dare they? They don't care about me. They don't care about the situation. They're just selfish. They're just this and they're just that. So the more we think of them or listen to them or even look at them, the more our anger flares up. The more our anger starts to intensify. So that their hatefulness may be real, imaginary, or just exaggerated. But whatever it is that's making us angry, we're inclined to give our full attention to that anger. Because the Buddha tells us, in fact, the root of our problem is the anger inside of us, and we have to come back to it and take care of it. Just like a firefighter, right? Like a firefighter, that we must put water on the blaze, right, on the fire itself immediately, and not worry about, or not waste time and worry about looking for the person that caused the fire, or who set the fire, or who set the house on fire, right? And so again, we go back to the little mantra: breathing in, I know that I'm angry. Breathing out, I know I must take care of my anger. So it's best not to listen to, look at, or think about the other person, or to say or do anything as long as anger persists. So if we put our minds into work of observing and calming our anger, then we'll avoid creating any more damage that we would probably regret later. As we start to deepen our meditative practices and deepen the contemplations that we do in meditation, or at least especially about our anger, then we'll recognize that the root of our anger is in our lack of understanding in ourselves, and the causes that are deep-seated, as well as the immediate causes, which have brought about this unpleasant state of affairs that we call anger, or wives and husbands, boyfriends, girlfriends, bosses, colleagues. But anger is also rooted in desire and pride and agitation and suspiciousness, that our method of dealing with events as they arise reflects our state of understanding as well as our state of confusion. The chief root of our anger are in ourselves. Our environment and other people are only secondary roots. So we can put up with the damage brought about by an earthquake, for instance, right? Or a flood. But if people do the exact same thing, or if people had caused the same damage, then we may not show much patience to them, right? Let me rephrase that. If we can put up with the damage that an earthquake or flood has caused, if we can accept that, right, that an earthquake or flood has caused damage, we're like, okay, cool, earthquake or flood caused this damage. But if people do that same type of damage, we're like, we're not very patient with that, right? We're not patient with the same damage. It's the exact same damage, okay? But on one side, an earthquake did it. On the other side, it was a terrorist attack. Right? That's a very extreme example, I'm sorry, but I can't think of what else would cause an earthquake type of disaster. But it's the exact same instance, it's the exact same damage, right? Just think of a mirrored universe, but on one end, earthquake did it, on the other end, a terrorist did it, right? A person. Well, we'll accept the natural disaster of damage, but guess what? We don't accept that a person has done it. Why? Theoretical question, you have to answer that. But if we're able to know that earthquakes and floods have causes, right? Because we know scientifically that there are causes to these earthquakes and floods, right? We know why they occurred. We know how they happened. We know the situations that the environment and the earth and the weather, et cetera, have. All these are pieces to this puzzle as to why an earthquake or flood has happened, right? We know the causes. So we should also be able to see that there are causes, either deep-seated or immediate, of harm done harm done to us by people. And we need to see and understand that these causes also we need to see that these causes, see that these feelings of anger also have causes, right? Like I said, you're not just angry to be angry. Anger just didn't come up out of nowhere. There's a root cause to the anger. And that's the primary objective of our practice, is to recognize, to see truly the root cause of this anger. Where had it come from? Why did it arise? And you continue to question and contemplate on that question. I'm angry at my child for doing this. Why? Because they didn't do it the way I wanted it to do it. Well, why did you want it done in the way you wanted to do it in the first place? Right? And you continue to question yourself. You question to get to the very root cause of the issue. And sometimes it may take some time, depending on the situation. It may take some time to really get to that true issue. But once you get to the core root, right, you'll know you got to the core root because you'll feel a sense of internal release, a kind of pressure being released in the mind and body, right? You'll just know it's an aha moment. It's truly an aha moment. But it may be the third answer you come to, maybe the fourth, maybe the 10th, maybe the 50th or the 100th or the 1,000th reason, right? There's no specific time frame of when you'll discover this true answer. But when you do, you'll know. You'll have that sense of release. And once you have that answer, then you'll know exactly what you need to do. You'll know exactly what you need to do. And once you know exactly what you need to do and you work toward getting rid of that root of that anger, of that specific anger, then you've eradicated it. You've extinguished it. It will no longer come up ever again. Sure, you may have gotten rid of one problem out of 99, but hey, at least it's not 100. And you do that over and over again. So the next time you find a root, you pluck that out, and you have 99 problems. Sorry, I'm continuing to try to stop myself from singing. Anyway, but you continue to do that practice. And the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter until one day you have 0 problems. You have 0 roots of anger. You have 0 roots of hatred. You have 0 roots of ignorance. And you're completely free. Imagine that. Do we not want that? I'm sure you want that. So what are you doing about it? That's the next question. Another part to this, which kind of falls into the next exercise of 15, which I won't be covering today, but toward the end of this practice or this exercise, we also have to discover or be aware that these people that make our lives difficult is because they're ignorant themselves. They're ignorant and they're prisoners of their own desires or their own hatreds. So if we speak angrily to them and treat them if we speak angrily to them and treat them as the enemy, then we're doing exactly what they're doing, and we're no different. We're not any better from them, any better than them, right? So in order to realize a state of no anger in our conscious and unconscious minds, we have to practice the meditation of loving kindness, or metta meditation, which is the next exercise. Because metta meditation, the loving kindness, is the direct practice of applying the opposite of anger, which is love, right? Because anger cannot kill anger. Anger just makes more anger, as we can see in the world affairs now, right? The only thing that's going to assuage or make anger better or disappear is to apply compassion, to apply kindness, to apply love on top of that issue. Because going back to spouses, for instance, well, if you're angry with your husband or wife, in that very moment you are angry, but your love isn't there too, because you can't have love and anger on the same line, right? The same equal line, right? They're on the spectrum, but they can never be angry. You can't be angry at your husband or wife, but also love them at the same time as much as you love them, right? It's always going to be fluctuating. And so when you're angry, the easiest thing to do is to remember that, you know what, I'm angry, but I do love you. And that is applying metta meditation. That is applying love. And it not suppresses, but it just eases the tension that anger is bringing, right? Because you're reminding yourself that I am not this anger. I am not this person that wants to be angry at my wife or husband or children or friend or coworkers, right? You don't want to be that person. Nobody wants to be that person. Nobody wants to be the person that they're afraid to come to. No one wants to be that person that married a monster or have monstrous children or friends or coworkers. Like, nobody wants that, right? And so if nobody wants it, if you don't want that, then of course nobody else wants that. So why are you providing that to somebody else when you wouldn't want that for yourself? So the first thing we do, as the Buddha mentioned, is to make conscious breaths. Be aware. The very moment you allow yourself to be conscious of that anger that has arisen, you have done more success in your practice than 99.99999% of the world. Because you stopped it, or at least you have the potential to stop it from ever escalating into something worse. Because what happens when people can't stop it and it escalates? Look what happens. Just look at the world. This is what happens when people cannot control their anger. So imagine feeling your emotion. The sooner we can kill it off. Of course, as Buddhists, we're pacifists. We don't believe in killing. But anger, chop its head off. It's the only thing we want to kill. But anyway, but we do that in meditation, right? When we sit in meditation, which we're about to do, and I don't want, usually for the meditation, I ask you to focus on whatever exercise that we're on. In this case, it's very specific. It's on anger. So I don't want to induce anger necessarily, but I do instead, let me take that back. Don't induce anger. Instead, recollect the time that you were very angry at someone. Okay? That way you're not creating new anger. However, even recollecting old anger can create new anger. So just keep in mind, right? If you're not standing protective enough on your mind, that old anger can create new anger if you start to play around with it. But anyway, so let's not do that. Do recollect the time when you're really angry, right? Where you may remember thinking, saying, and doing things that you may have later regretted, that you later felt remorse for saying, doing, and thinking, that for things that may have caused harm to yourself or to others, right? So find that memory and then dig deep. Ask yourself, what was the situation? Why was I angry? What caused the anger to arise? What were the reasons for that anger, right? And then once you get to the point of what the reasons were, now instead of focusing on the externalities, because that's what you're doing at first, you're thinking of the situation, you're thinking of what caused the anger, you're thinking of who is involved, you're thinking why it happened. And then once you recognize the causes of the anger, now we're going internally. Okay. Well, these causes of this anger, like I said, people and the environment are secondary roots. I can yell at you, I can curse you out, I can call you names, and that may get you angry. But me saying those things is secondary. That's not the cause of your anger. Guess who is? You are. And so when we're meditating and we're able to commit to acknowledging that we are responsible for that anger. No one else. People can say and do things to you all they want, but that has zero power unless you give it power. And if you have ever became angry or disappointed or distressed or disrespected or jealous or any other emotion other than acceptance, you've given that person, thing, or place power that they should not have had or that they did not deserve. So then we start to analyze these reasons of why we're angry. You start to tear away these reasons, tear away these layers of the anger that you've held, that you've had. And you go through the list and you just, again, you dig deeper and deeper and deeper. You pull layers and layers and layers of our the reasons, the core roots of our anger is just like an onion, right? You have to pull away the layers in order to get to its root, to its core. It's the only way we're going to be able to find or transform our anger into non-anger. I feel like I'm missing something and I can't recall. Okay, until I remember it. Questions, concerns, emotional outbursts.
Actually, it's not an outburst. It's consistent. They say the small outcome, smaller outcome is better than the big bang.
Mm-hmm.
Or something unfair. But if you're leaving, so it's quite slowly, then it's better than bigger. Right? It's not a large angle. With respect to anger, I think same thing. So if you release your anger, express your anger in controlled manner, but you recognize it, now hold on it, don't make a story, but you say, start making a story, and okay, you can do this, and this. So I think anger is like a reflex action, which is, like you said, is guarding you, something like somebody pokes you,
right?
The same thing happens. But again, like after listening, like it looks like anger, many different kind of actions people have. Like the wife is in a situation where they're different, but let's say the outburst, your child's mostly children's, your own children's, you're angry, but there's a love, a love is what you are too much attached and you trying to tell them, do this, I can hurt you or harm you, and you're loving. But so anger and love are both at the same time, both are present there, but you're angry at them. So that was kind of one way he said, no, they can't exist at the same time.
Right.
And especially in the children's situation, it's always a love, which is starting more anger. If you don't love it, you detach them, probably you can be less angry and see them like other person. But then other situations like people like mob mentality, especially like people burning cars, burning shops, and like for no reason, like this because the news or media or whatever is happening, or like it's like a mirror neurons, they're copying other people like monkey, and that's just angry. Like so that's a different anger, which is so. I don't know what is causing trouble. If nothing is there, and we are putting no story here. And then third time I see like you're going on the road and road rage situation. They're like you don't know the person, and like you're angry at the person. can't tell if it's causing anger. Like we are judging. You know, we are trying to be judging on every situation. This is right and this is wrong.
Mm-hmm. I have a pen. No, it's okay. I can attempt to recollect. First point that you brought up about what?
Like you're loving them.
Oh yeah, I don't like children, but but the rage is what I'm talking about. But anyway, it reminds me of a rage room. Has anyone been to a rage room before? We don't have one in San Antonio. I was talking to Quang. I was like, kind of need one. It's essentially a room. It's kind of like think of an escape room, right? It's essentially the same kind of, it's a room filled with a whole bunch of junk, like old TVs and mirrors and glass and cups and whatever. And you just go in there with like a bat or a hammer and you start to break crap, right? Just you're raging and breaking things to let out stress and relief. I'm like, man, every once in a while I kind of need that too. But then you have to go back and be like, well, why? Why would I even want to rage like that? Like that's a waste of my energy. Besides it potentially being fun, you know, I don't know. But even at the end of that, you may feel relieved. But the anger, the emotions that cause you to want to rage out is still there. They're just suppressed. Now they're tired because you just started swinging bats for 30 minutes. And so that anger is tired too. Same way that your body is tired, your anger is tired. I'm like, you know what, we're gonna take a nap. But a few hours later, the anger comes back and like, guess what? We're still here. We're still angry, right? What else did you say? I'm so sorry. I should have wrote this down. Right. Mm-hmm. Think of anger like cancer. We all have cancerous cells in our body. It's always there, right? They're just dormant. The only reason people get cancer is because the conditions allow those cancerous cells to actually start to be fed and starts to develop cancer. But we all have the potential to have cancer. We all have those same cancerous cells. They're just dormant. So likewise, all our negative emotions, all of our negative habits, all of our negative anything that isn't happening all the time is still there. They're just dormant. They're not being fed. They're not being watered, right? But they're still in our conscious mind. They're still there. And so, don't have the list somewhere. But in right of the Eightfold Path, and I believe it's in Right View or Right Intention, one of them. I'm pretty sure it's Right View. There are 4 aspects of mental formations. I'm going to use wholesome. Wholesome roots that have arisen, wholesome roots that have not arisen, wholesome roots that have now I'm forgetting my lists. I'm usually really good at lists. Wholesome roots that have arisen, have not arisen. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you mind, excuse me, do you mind getting my book, the Buddha Journey book? It's basically a description that anything and everything is seated in our mind under 4 conditions, right? And when those conditions arise, if we're able to acknowledge and be mindful of them when they arise, it will become 100% more beneficial for you to be able to recognize them and see them for what they are when they arise and be able to do something about it before it's too late. Uh-oh. I guess I took it out. I swear I remember having it in here. Oh, here we go. Sorry, it was on right effort after all. So it's called the 4 right efforts, or the 4 great endeavors: to prevent the arising of unarisen, unwholesome states, to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen, to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen, and to maintain and perfect wholesome states already arisen. I'll repeat that. To prevent the arising of unarisen, unwholesome states. So we want to avoid trying to arise any unarisen, unwholesome states. 2, to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. So if anything that is unwholesome or unbeneficial or negative that has already arisen, we want to abandon that. 3rd is to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen. Same way that we have unwholesome seeds in our conscious mind, we also have wholesome ones, and those are the ones that we want to water. And to maintain and perfect wholesome states that have already arisen. So anything that's wholesome or positive or beneficial and helpful that is already active in our lives, we want to continue letting them be active. Okay, I'm actually going to stop now so we have some time to meditate, because any other questions? Are we all just perfectly happy now? No more anger? No more yelling and blaming husbands and wives and children?
I did find it interesting just talking about the children and your love for children. I understood what you were saying. Yeah. In my head, the root is just different because you're maybe disparaging everything you desire not to. So that's probably.
I'm not to be unhealthy and eat kids.
So that's why the anger or why doesn't really cause it, right? Because then you have to do it and anger that and then there's a different idea.
Yeah, expectation.
It would be different situations, yes, as to who and why you're angry. But the bottom line of why we ever become angry is directly linked to our desire and our expectation. Because just think of any time you're angry. Why are you angry at kids? Because they didn't clean up their room. Why are you angry at your husband? Because he didn't do the dishes or take out the trash. Why are you angry at your coworker? Because they didn't do their job. Why are you angry at the person that cut you off? Because they think they're better than you and you're better than them, right? It's all because of our desire of wanting things to be different than what they are. That's it. So that's why I always say, you're not that important. To have things the way that you want them to be, we're not that important to have the world conform to how we want it to be. We're not that important. This world itself isn't that important. This world itself is just one speck of dust, the billions of specks of dust in our own solar system, under the trillions of other specks of dust in the entire universe. We are nothing. But we are something in the moment that we're in. That's what's important. That's what we have to remember and recognize. I am not this anger, right? So last week that apparently gave my very somber talk on Sunday was giving my formula of meditating on non-self. And that formula was essentially questioning who you think you are. Were you here last Sunday?
No.
Okay, so didn't hear my little formula. So I'll repeat my little formula. Okay, yes, it was a little choppy, freaking internet, even though the router is literally right here. It's literally right here. So why does it tell me I have low connectivity? Stupid. Anyway, so when it comes to non-self, because the abolishment of non-self, the abandonment of non-self will solve every single problem in your life. Every single problem. And so the thing of non-self, which is an extremely deep, heavy, difficult topic, and it is not one that I will probably ever anytime soon give a full discussion on, because I don't believe it's appropriate for most untrained minds. Because it's one of those things that I can't teach you. It's one of those things you have to discover and experience. Just like enlightenment. I can't give you enlightenment. I can't tell you this is what enlightenment is. I can try to use words, but it's not going to be the same. So non-self is the same thing. There's the three I'm freeing my list today. The three marks of existence: non-self, impermanence, and enlightenment, or nirvana, right? Or, sorry, not nirvana, suffering. These are the three aspects that basically constitute life. We all suffer, we have non-self, and that their life is impermanence. But anyway, for non-self, you simply, again, non-self is what? Or the self, what we believe is the self is, I need to stop talking. What we believe is the self is this character that we've developed throughout our lives, right? This personality, this person that we believe is me. But this person that we believe is me, the likes, the dislikes, the pleasures, the displeasures, our loves and hates and biases and discriminations, all these things do not constitute who we are. They only constitute who you are because of the environment we were in, right? Because of the things you were taught, the things that you've heard and seen and watched and believed, etc., etc. But in non-self, my little formula, if I can do it in a mindful manner, is again asking yourself, who am I? Who is this Quang tree? Who is this person that people call Quang tree? Where did Quang tree come from? Who was Quang tree before he was Quang tree? Who was Quang tree after he was Quang tree? Is Quang tree only the accumulation of the 5 aggregates of form, feeling, perception, mental formation, consciousness? If Quang tree is form, then who is Quang tree without form? If I am form, then what am I with no form? If I am my feelings, who am I without these feelings? If I am these perceptions, who am I without these perceptions? If I am these mental formations, who am I without these mental formations? If I am consciousness, who am I without this consciousness? I cannot be this form. I am this form and not this form. I am these feelings and not these feelings. I am these perceptions and not these perceptions. I am these mental formations and not these mental formations. I am this consciousness and not this consciousness. I am the awareness of experiencing this form. I am the awareness of experiencing these feelings. I'm the awareness experiencing these mental formations, these perceptions. I'm the awareness experiencing these mental formations. I'm the awareness experiencing this consciousness. I am not these things. These things are not me. Who am I? If I'm not form, if I'm not feeling, if I'm not perception, if I'm not mental formations, if I'm not consciousness, and these things are eradicated, freedom is attained. And when freedom is attained, liberation is at your doorstep. Who are you? Who am I? I am no one. That is who we are. So if you are none of these things and all these things at the same time, then what happiness is yours? What anger is yours? Is this anger yours? What I've been doing recently, and it sounds so dumb, is talking to myself in a third person. Because I'm trying to disassociate myself from myself. Because sometimes when I have moments of anger or desire or anything, my normal practice is to meditate on, this is not me, this desire is not me. Why am I desiring this thing? Why am I wanting this? Right? Same thing when he does or says things, I'm like, oh, like why? Why do I feel bad? Why do I feel unheard? Why do I feel misjudged? Why anything? Who am I feeling these things? If I'm not form, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness, then where does this come from? It's very difficult. It's not easy, right? And people don't want to think about it either. Nobody wants to think that they don't exist. You've spent decades of your life creating this persona, creating this personality, creating this person that people know. And now I'm here telling you, oh, no, that's real. Nobody wants to believe that. But it's still true. You know why it's true? Because 50 years after you die, no one will ever know you existed. So why are you taking care of yourself so much? Sorry, why are you taking care of your persona so much? Even famous people will soon be forgotten about. Look, our founding fathers, how many times did they ever be brought up? How often does noon is brought up anymore? How much is Da Vinci brought up? Right? People that change and discover things, yeah, they're in history books, but eventually the history books are going to get too big, they're going to start cutting off the later things in life. In my career, I remember when we're making reports, typically, at least in my field of career, we only go back 13 months. Anything beyond 13 months didn't exist. Does that mean it never happened? No, we just don't care about it. We have to think of our lives in the same way. You know, I'm waiting for that. I pray that we just get sucked into a black hole every day. Too long. I want it now, damn it. Just kidding. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I think people put too much emphasis and worry too much about the future when you have zero control over it. People are obsessed. That's also the problem. I'm so sorry. We're not going to have time to do walking meditation. But that's part of the reason why we don't have control over our minds. Because our mind, the ego, because it controls us, it only has 2 modes of full control out of the 3 modes that we have. The modes is past, present, and future. The mind has full control over the past and full control over the future, at least in the thinking pattern, right? Because if you sit in meditation, you try and clear your mind and be in the present moment, and your mind's all like, I don't have any control of the present moment because there's nothing happening in the present moment for it to control. And so instead, it's like, well, since I can't control the present moment, let's think about that argument we had with our wife last weekend because she yelled at me for putting forks upside down in the dishwasher. I don't know. But whatever it is, right? It's making you recollect arguments from the past. Whether it was last week, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, 10 years ago, it's bringing back things because it can influence you and control how the mind is thinking. Or it's thinking about the anxieties of the future. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do tomorrow? It's Saturday. Do I want to go somewhere? Am I cooking dinner? Am I going out? I have to go grocery shopping. I have to make my list for next week. I have to do this, I have to do that. And so it has control over that. And so it's going to bombard you with past and present. Past and future. Past and future problems, but it has no control of the present. And that's why we suffer. It's because we allow the past and the future to influence when it doesn't need to. The past has already happened. You can't go back and change it. So what's the point? The future yet has not happened. So why are you obsessing over it? There's still no point. Unless you have a time machine to go back to the past or jump to the future, why are we worried? Why are we so concerned with the past and future? It makes 0 sense. It makes 0 sense because we have no control. And so then we have some control, which is why it's difficult for a lot of people to meditate because they can't control the mind. They just think about the past and think about the future. I can't stop thinking. Well, first of all, nobody told you to stop thinking, right? Thinking is habitual. Thinking will naturally happen. That's not the point of meditation, to not to think, but to know that you're thinking. Because if you know that you're thinking, then you know where it's coming from and why it's arising. And then you can go in and do something about it. You can acknowledge, oh, this is a past memory. Nothing I can do about it. Acknowledge it. Okay, it's happened, whatever. Come back to your object of meditation. Come back to your breath. Oh, what am I going to do for lunch? Because it's practically lunchtime. Where am I going to go? Am I eating? Am I eating out? Am I making food? It hasn't happened yet. Don't worry about it. Come back to your breath. Present moment. It's all we have to do. Just come back to the present moment. Likewise, if we're in a situation that's causing us anger, what is the mind doing? It's definitely not being in the present. What it is doing is already trying to think of the future of what I'm going to say, how am I going to react, what is my comeback, what does my retaliation plan look like, what weapon do I want to use to beat them up, whatever it is, right? It's already thinking of the future. There's no power there. The only power you have is to accept, acknowledge, in this moment I am angry. That's it. The sheer acknowledgement can be enough power to shut it down, depending on the intensity. But the acknowledgement, let me take that back. The sooner you can acknowledge anger, the less intensity it'll have and the easier it is for it to just be dropped. Right? Because think, now that we're meditating, we're going to meditate. But when you meditate, you think of anger, right? If you're unmindful, and this is outside of this practice specifically, but if you're in any meditation and the emotion or feelings of anger arises, according to the Anapanasati Sutra and according to the mindfulness of body that we first went over, there are going to be bodily signs, obvious bodily signs that something is brewing that is causing discomfort, that is causing disharmony, that is causing the mind and body to disconnect. Because what happens when we're angry? Our breathing starts to kind of intensify a little bit, right? It gets a little bit heavier, it gets a little bit coarse. Maybe the body starts to tense up. Maybe it starts to get warm, right? You get flushed and you get heated. All these are signs that something is happening. So you may be sitting there sweating and so hot, and people are like, what is wrong with this person? But mentally, you're literally fighting, you're arguing with somebody or something. But you're unaware. So by the time you get up, it looks like you've just gotten out of the pool. Instead of getting out of meditation, you're getting out of the hot tub. Literally. So the quicker we can recognize any emotion, positive, negative, or even neutral, the quicker we can recognize it, the less power it has over you. Okay, I'm literally actually going to stop talking. I'm going to make sure I stop talking by getting up and going to my meditation cushion. So do a quick 30-second stretch. Welcome back. It was not nearly enough time to analyze our anger, but hopefully give you an idea of what to worry about next time, or meditate on next time. Any insights anybody would like to share for our closing of the class?
I can see how this exercise really gets to the core of non-self, where you think like, all right, why am I angry? Well, I got these things, like, why are those there? Eventually to the point where it's like, well, who in the first place is angry? Why is this here in the first place?
Yep.
I found that when thinking about my anger, thinking about something that made me angry, and I think they were angry, and I found myself, because I knew why I was angry. She hit my seeds in the restaurant, and so it made me start to think about her perspective. What was she so angry about?
Think of anger or any emotion really you're feeling has the potential of becoming or creating a domino effect, right? Especially with our anger, because if you wake up in the morning just pissed off and you go to work pissed off, and then someone would be like, "Oh, good morning, Sue," and you're like, "F off," you know, and then they become upset, angry, and then you ruin their mood, and now they're going to do that to somebody else, right? And so it's a waterfall of everyone just doing the same thing. And so when we interact with people who are angry or anything that is unwholesome or negative, then you simply just have to, all right, I'm sorry that you're angry, but you can't touch me. Another song. Let's say something else. But it's also, we have to ensure that in moments like that, we can't allow other people to influence those feelings either. Because otherwise, if you do, then you're giving them power over your own mind. You're giving them power over how you should be feeling. And that's no way to live. That's no way to have things be handled, right? That's why we have to create the conditions in our mind to be our own guardian. Because if you're not going to guard the mind, then who is? If no one else is going to control your anger, then who is? I'm sorry, if you're not going to control your anger, then who is? Yeah, asking those questions, finding the root causes is going to be our only option to liberation, or for liberation at least. So for anger, ask why. Or just do what I do and be like, it's not my problem. I'm a very mouthy and sarcastic monk every once in a while. Because someone will be like, oh, that hurt my feelings. I'm like, that's not my problem. That's truly an answer that I give. That's Quang. I think he said something a couple of weeks ago, like, you know, that wouldn't hurt my feelings. I'm like, I don't care if it hurts your feelings or not. Because your feelings are not my problem. They're not my concern, right? I'm not in your mind to control those feelings. So how is it my problem? I can only control what I say and what I think and do, right? Sure, I may say things, I'm sure I've said several things that were hurtful or misplaced, right? And I have to take responsibility on those things. But I can't take responsibility on how he feels about it. It's not my problem. Right? So even though that sounds kind of harsh to say, that's not my problem, to somebody who's angry, but it's the truth. Because at some point, this person who's angry is angry, but also looking for validation of their anger, which is why they lash out to you, which is why they yell at you, which is why they're screaming. It's because they want you to acknowledge their anger too. They want you to be angry with them too. That's why people sometimes feed off of our reaction to things, because that's what they want. I'm angry, you're going to be angry too. The more you're angry, the better I feel. So if someone's angry, you're yelling at you, oh well. Just got to be nonchalant about things.
Especially the moment I'm looking like, why they do that? This is
Exactly. Don't entertain these people. Don't entertain their anger either. I've jokingly said this several times, but it's not entirely a joke either. But one of the superpowers that I've attained through my practice is being unoffendable. I've said this a couple times, but it's true. When people try to offend me, I actually love it. I was like, please, go for it. I really want it. Because it does not make any sense to me why people become offended of things that are said to them. Like it doesn't make sense to me. And as soon as you recognize that it just doesn't make sense, the more you just don't care. Like if someone's calling me names or calling me out, like, okay, good for you, congratulations, you want an award or something? Like I don't understand what you want, right? I do understand what they want. They want a reaction. Guess what, honey? You ain't gonna get one. Because in this sense, I am better than you, mentally at least. So I'm not gonna give you any power to try to offend me. No, thank you. Because you're really, again, I said this formula before. If someone is trying to offend you, you simply just have to ask yourself, is it true? That's it. That is the magic, that is the secret spell to this enlightening moment. Someone's offending you, calling you names, calling you out. Is it true? Yes or no? If it's true, well, you know it's true, they know it's true, and why are you offended? Calling you names, cussing you out. Is it true? No, it's not true. You know it's not true. They probably know it's not true. Why are you offended? So it makes no sense. It makes no sense to be offended about things. The only reason you're offended is because your ego's trying to be like, oh no, how dare they say that to me? Don't they know who I am? Don't they know what I've done? Don't they know this or that? Right? The ego is just simply trying to defend itself. That is the only reason people become offended. But imagine the ego's gone. Imagine the ego's let go. Imagine the self no longer exists. Then there's nothing there to be offended. Right? So that's why I encourage people to try to offend me. Go for it. Talk behind my back. I don't care. What does it do to me? Stupid. Okay. I've extremely overspoken and went completely way over off our time, but I hope you got something out of it. As a reminder, we do not have a next class. On the 28th, in lieu of our retreat. So our next class will be the class in July. July 12th will be our next class. Otherwise, I will close up the class and see some of you tomorrow. Please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times and transferring the merit. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.